Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second session of our Youth Empowerment Series. My name is Jessenia, and I'm joined here with Rijin, Hunyah, and Cynthia, and we will be your hosts for this session every week, Wednesday at 7 p.m. For everyone who joined us last week, thank you so much for attending our kickoff, and we hope you learned about COVID-19's impact on the youth and tips for staying safe and making the most out of this time. The recording for our previous session is now posted on our YouTube channel, so please be sure to follow us there, as well as our other social media to always stay up to date. Now, getting into today's topic, we will be hosting a session on how to win that job offer and all the tips and tricks that you need to know to begin your dream career. The past year has been particularly difficult in the labor market for youth, and I would love to share light into some of the steps that can be taken to kickstart your careers. In today's session, we will go over job search networking tips, as well as how to write that outstanding resume, cover letter, and absolutely ace that interview. Okay, so let's begin with the initial stage in the process of job search. And oftentimes this can be the most challenging part. So the job search and finding the contacts and people in your network and circle to reach out to can sometimes be nerve-wracking when you're first starting out and don't know who to first approach or reach out to. But I like to think of it as a constant process, and sometimes that you don't see happen overnight, similar to how you grow a garden. You know, you start out with nurturing it, feeding it, and watering it every single day, but you don't see the fruits of all of your labors until a little bit later. So that's the same thing with job search as well, that sometimes it takes some time, but my main advice is to never give up hope and continue along your way. So does anyone want to share their experiences of job search over the last year? I know it's been particularly difficult with the reduced amount of labor opportunities, but you should all be really proud of yourself for continuing to try, and again, never giving up hope, even in spite of the things that you face. So please feel free to put in the chat or you can unmute yourself and speak. So.
Can I share?
Yeah, definitely.
So over the past last year, I've actually gotten to know a lot of jobs that are out there and a lot of organizations through LinkedIn and different websites and social media. That's where I got to know and work with different organizations, and I got to know a lot of organizations I didn't know that they existed until now. So it was all from all these websites and all these ads. So that's how the last year has been for me. And I've been networking a lot through Zoom meetings, through different collaborations, through a lot of different things that I've been doing.
Awesome. That's so great to hear. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Hunyah, especially with the fact that, networking is really important thing that you have to do, especially during the pandemic, right? So more than like for me, especially more than applying for jobs, I found that it was more important to make connections, because after the pandemic, those connections, they help you, you're able to learn from them the crucial skills that you need to have in order to, go for those important jobs and to have a brighter future. And I feel like, like using websites like LinkedIn allowed me to, connect with everyone, connect with people, and ask those questions. And so that, I had those answers that helps me build a good resume, or, those skills that, which would help me find a better job in the future.
And I just wanted to mention that I found that Indeed has some really good job opportunities, and they have some really fast response time. So I would definitely suggest you to try, Indeed as well, and don't give up if you don't hear a response, because that's how you can find your opportunity. Just keep trying.
For sure. And there's definitely, I think there can be a point where you reach this lack of motivation after trying many, many times. But I think anyone can say, who's been through the process, that, you do learn through each of those rejections. A lot of the times they redirect you to better opportunities. So everything is definitely a learning experience. So thank you all for sharing. Really appreciate that. So let's continue on. So there are three main principles to be aware of when networking and job search. So to begin with, firstly, is they can't hire you if they don't know you. So it's extremely important to have your name out there on social media, Google, LinkedIn, and especially more important than ever these days amidst the pandemic. So having a professional online profile really goes a long way. And for example, having a good headshot on your LinkedIn profile and having all of your up-to-date and relevant experiences is super important, so that even if your resume is not directly in the employer's hands, they still have a way to see all of your relevant skills if they are recruiting. So the second principle is also to remember that how you conduct your job search gives clues to the type of employee that you will be on the job. So it's important to remember that the interview for a certain role or position begins the moment that you start interacting with the firm and its employees. And these are all indicators of how you will perform actually on the job. So for example, being proactive, resourceful, and positive are all important characteristics that you should really be showing throughout the process, because when you're first interacting with any member of the team, whether it's the hiring manager or even someone, someone else, any employee in the organization, they are always taking notes and really seeing how you do present yourself and keep yourself. So those are super important things. And then the last principle would be, even if you don't receive a yes today, this does not mean that it can change in the future. So remaining persistent and following up, as well as making sure that you don't lose hope throughout the process. For example, if you're networking with the firm consistently and remembering to reach out every 2 to 3 months, you will always remain top of mind if they're ever hiring for a role in the near future. So my question for everyone is, have they been able to implement any of these principles in their job search, maybe organically, as you've been looking yourself, and have they been successful for you throughout your time?
I just want to read a comment from our Facebook Live. Anu says that networking is crucial in job search, which I definitely agree with. For example, connecting with the contacts on LinkedIn is very important, because you get a higher chance of getting a response if you make the effort to try to connect with someone.
Anyone else?
I have something to add. In my opinion, when employers Google you and when they see that you have a LinkedIn and you have other links, like let's say I have my LinkedIn profile, but I also have my links to my books and different things I do, I feel that becomes like a resume itself when they Google you, and that gets them to approach you even more, and they'll somehow send you an offer by looking at all your things at Google. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I even agree
Definitely.
with, I even agree with Hanya in the sense that, connecting with people, like I said, with online platforms with LinkedIn. And not only that, will never lose hope, which is a really important aspect, because often, when you're looking for a job, you tend to get a lot of rejections, and it can affect, the way you look at things as well. And I feel like you always have to remain positive. And that goes back to the third principle, don't lose hope, which is what's all about. If you keep on, if you keep on going, at the end of the day, it's going to all pay off. And I feel like that's very crucial to get a job at the end of the day.
Definitely. And I see a question in the chat from Anu actually, and it's, what are your thoughts on volunteering and how can it help with increasing your chances for getting employed? So I guess I can start out and then you guys feel free to add on too. So I think definitely volunteering in a lot of ways, it's just as important as your work experience, because there's a lot of soft skills and even technical skills that you can learn from volunteering. And these days, especially in the pandemic, there's been so many increased volunteer opportunities. So if you look up your region, for example, York region, and then volunteer opportunities for students, or even for adults, you will find a lot of places. And I know earlier on in the pandemic, they were doing a grant as well, that whoever volunteers for example, 100 hours, they would be compensated for that too. So for sure, volunteering is definitely super important. And yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys think too.
I mean, I agree too, right? I feel like the volunteering is just like a stepping stone, I feel like, to the work industry, because I guess volunteering, you get to learn those critical skills, I guess, like communicate with people, work with people, collaborate with people, work in a team. And I feel like, learning how to, like, I guess, volunteer in in a workplace or some sort of an organization is really, really to get those skills that you need for, like, to work in the work industry. And I feel like that's really important just when you start out, that you start out with a volunteering position and then you move from there.
I agree. I've been volunteering within an organization for over 10 years. I've been volunteering from high school till I was in college, and I'm still volunteering even now, and it's benefited me, which landed me to my second job actually. And now I'm here. So volunteer has a lot of its benefits. Like, you don't see it when you first start, like when you have to do little tasks and stuff, but when you stay in the organization and volunteer for, let's say, over 10 years, it really benefits you at the end, because at the end it's rewarding. So you help people out, but you also help yourself out. So I think it's rewarding.
Definitely. So there's that, you're not only, enhancing your skills and learning new things, but you're also giving back to your community, which is really important these days too. So it's definitely like a mutually beneficial relationship in that way.
And I totally agree with the comment. As Brittany said, volunteers join Youth for Change. I feel like, if you want to get those skills, please join us, volunteer with us for many of the events that we host. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So moving along, I think it's important to note that the scope of job search has changed significantly over time. So it isn't enough these days to apply to 30 or 40 jobs on LinkedIn or Indeed and hope to hear a response, because more often than not, there's a very low chance of being hired or even receiving an interview through this process. So this is where the importance of receiving an internal referral comes in. So when you spend time networking, meeting employees, and getting to know the different people at different levels in the firm, and really communicating what value you can add to their organization, they would be a lot more likely to hire you. And in fact, stats show that there's a 14 times greater chance of being hired through an internal referral, because there's that credibility from a current employee that you have all the skills and capabilities to do the job effectively. So this really goes to show how building those connections and spending the majority of your time on outreach is the most important thing throughout this job search process. So I think we do have another question in the chat, and it's from Uzma asking, what are some of the barriers for newcomer youth in getting jobs? So if anyone has any input for that, please do let us know.
I think the best way for newcomers to start would be to search for organizations and see which organization they think that it would be convenient for them to commute and to work with. And then from there, get references, and eventually they'll land a job, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's definitely difficult for newcomers, especially when they're, youth and still growing up and going through all of those phases, to find some employment or even finding some ways to receive volunteer opportunities. But there's a lot of communities and support groups that you can even find online on social media, on Facebook or Instagram for newcomers. By joining those, everyone is sharing those types of information, and really getting that information and spreading that to one another is really important too. And really starting out with, applying online and then using LinkedIn, it definitely is your best friend in this case, because you're able to, connect with people virtually, even though you can't meet them at this point in a real life setting. But that's definitely when I know there are like a variety of barriers, and it's not easy, of course, but those are some of the ways for youth who've recently come here to begin their search. And even by talking to people at school, their guidance counselors, career counselors, they can also connect them with different people in the community who can help them out. So those are some of the ways.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that too. I feel like, some of the barriers that we have as youth today is really not only having like a really good resume, but also like not having those key connections that can, get you to where you want. So I feel like those barriers are really like, important to go like, get over with. So I feel like, things that you can do today is, I guess, think about like after the pandemic, what you can do like in terms of the creation centers, right? Are there any recreation centers you can join? Are there any groups you can join? Where, are there any groups online, I guess, where you can join, talk about, events that you can. And I feel like the best example here is like Youth for Change. You can volunteer with us, and we can have various events, and you will be able to learn from us and all the events that we've been setting up.
There's another comment from Facebook Live from Samia. The newcomer youths can also tap into resources like the government-funded employment agencies, as well as the Welcome Center. So definitely, those are all great.
And we have Youth for Change resources available on our website. So please take a look. So please go on it and please check the resources.
Yeah, and Mariam brings up a great point too, that close to 70% of professional positions don't even get advertised. It relies on the power of your network. So this can really lead to a whole, new conversation on the hidden job market and how majority of jobs really aren't advertised. And it's about really who you know, and that goes to show that building your connections and expanding your outreach is the key to success. So okay, so when first reaching out to people, this can really be done in a 4-step process. So first, what you want to do is identify and create a list of 10 to 20 of your target employers. So this can be done by looking at some of the companies in industries that you want to work at. So by looking on Google, or there's a whole bunch of different websites that have Toronto startups, for example, that are hiring. And then once you've narrowed down that list, then you look for potential connections. So we would recommend 2 to 3 for each target employer. And again, this can be done through LinkedIn, by filtering by company, or reaching out to alumni from your school that have graduated and now work at a company. So for instance, when I was looking for a job in accounting for next summer, I used this LinkedIn feature and reached out to individuals who had recently graduated in the last 2 to 10 years and had a wide range of experiences that they could share with me. So now step 3 is actually reaching out to those identified contacts, and we will be showing you what a sample message looks like when you are reaching out, because I know that's something that people find someone that they want to reach out to or who inspires them, but then they don't know what are they supposed to say in that initial message. How do they sound professional, but also at the same time have those interpersonal skills and really have good open communication. So finally, the last step would be to remain persistent and follow up every 2 to 3 months with your contacts so they remember you and see the eagerness that you have for your role. So it's really important to be politely persistent, and obviously you don't want to be overbearing or constantly messaging them, but just to keep on the top of their mind and remember that you are eager to learn and work at their organization if a position does come up in the future. So now let's take a look at this video by some professionals on networking tips that they have for students.
Here are Laura's 5 tips for networking your way into a job. Tip number 1, get your personal branding in order, digital and analog. All right, Laura, so tell us why personal branding is so important.
We live in a digital world now, and so everybody can see anything about you pretty much at any time. So of course your resume and your business cards need to look fantastic, but all of your platforms, all of your profiles need to be up to date, consistent, have the most relevant information, and you need to look like you know what you're doing.
Yeah, and you're saying don't just only do LinkedIn. You have to do all of the networks.
No, although some people, it still surprises me, some people are still skipping LinkedIn. You cannot skip LinkedIn.
That's the number one you can't skip.
It's very important. You need to have a great photo. You need to have all of the most relevant and up-to-date information. It needs to be truthful.
Yes.
Make sure you have references. That's all a given. But if you've got a website, a public Instagram, anything else, Twitter, you name it, it all needs to be consistent and reflect who you are.
Yeah, I completely agree. Tip number 2, take an inventory of who you already know. All right, Laura, so why do we need to take inventory of who we already know if we already know them?
Well, we know a lot of people, and after you've been in the professional world for a while, your network is going to grow, and it feels sometimes overwhelming and impossible to stay on top of all of those relationships.
Right.
But it's really important, especially if you're looking for a new job, to take stock of who you already know in that industry and see if they might be able to help you or give you some guidance.
Right.
I like to use the holidays as a time to reconnect with people I haven't seen in maybe a year or 2 years. I always send them a note, say hey, and then usually that results in a lunch meeting or just getting together in January or February.
Catching up.
It's really important to continue to nourish those relationships.
And when you send these notes, it's via email?
Yeah, it's always via email. Sometimes I'll send out a Christmas card, a digital Christmas card, and I'll get a few responses. But if it's not the holidays, don't worry. It could be the middle of the summer. But I think email is a great way of just reconnecting. Make sure it's brief and to the point, but always authentic.
Yeah, it's a great way to stay top of mind too.
Absolutely.
Tip number 3, take stock of who you need to know to make your next move. Okay, so this is the one that I think people are going to be really interested in, is who do you need to connect with when you know what you want to do next?
So this is the time that you do your research. If you've got a target company or a target part of the industry that you want to get into, you probably need more relationships at that company, even if it's the company you already work at, in order to cultivate your next move. So I think it's really important to take informational meetings. You need to keep track of these informational meetings, but do your research and reach out to people. This could be internal or external, and then I like to make a spreadsheet. I track all the informational meetings. I take notes on what was discussed, any advice, if they connect me with other people. I track if I followed up on those things. And then, of course, especially if it's somebody you're meeting for the first time and they're giving you their time or expertise, you always send a thank you note.
Always.
Always. Always, always. If it's a job interview, that's a handwritten thank you note. If it's an in-person interview with somebody more senior than you, it's a handwritten thank you note. I think you'll know when an email is okay, but no matter what, you always follow up to say thanks.
Tip number 4, don't be afraid of cold outreach. Everyone's already afraid of cold outreach, so why should we not be afraid?
You can't be afraid of cold outreach because it's just how business gets done.
Yes.
If I had been afraid of cold outreach, I would have never been able to launch my career and end up with just push through the.
Or they don't reply, and it's like, well, then you're no worse off than you
What
were
if
before.
you haven't lost anything, but always make sure that your cold outreach is appropriate for the person. It's very approachable, it's brief and to the point.
Yes, and tailored. Like they want to know why them, why are you talking to me versus somebody else?
Absolutely.
Tip number 5, try to cultivate a genuine love for other people. This is one of those things where it seems sort of obvious. You need to like other people to network, but the key word here is genuine.
Absolutely. It really helps if you can cultivate a genuine love for getting to know other people and building relationships with them. I mean, that's what this is all about. So if you view networking as just names and business cards and
kind of icky,
collecting contacts, you're really not using your network properly. I think it's important to go into whether it's a networking event or a meeting or an alumni networking thing, you really need to go in wanting to like other people and genuinely listen to what they have to say, ask questions, get to know them. Those relationships are.
Okay, awesome. So I hope you guys all found those tips really helpful, and really learned something about from these professionals on networking, and provided a bit of insight onto how to go about building those professional relationships. So now I have a question for all of you. What are your opinions about the tips that they gave? And is there anything else that you would like to add or share about your personal experiences that you've been able to gain by following some of the tips that they mentioned?
I would like to share.
Yeah, please.
So in my opinion, networking gets you to the hidden job market, because there is often jobs that are not advertised and sometimes they're for eternal hiring. So the more you network, the more you get your dream job. So in my opinion, it's like the tip of the iceberg kind of concept. I'm pretty sure we all heard of it, but it really benefits you once you start getting to know people, once you network, once you build a professional relationship. Like, it gets you to the job that you want. And sometimes, because some jobs are not always advertised on LinkedIn, sometimes you find it by yourself. Maybe it's like a cold call. So these things come in.
Yeah, definitely. Exactly. Being able to tap into that hidden job market is usually through your professional connections. And I also really liked how they spoke about cold outreach. I know that's sometimes something scary in the beginning, because you're reaching out to someone that you don't know at all. You're kind of wary if they'll even take that few minutes to respond to you, but more often than not, they will. And especially if you do have some connection with them prior, for example, you've worked in a similar field or you graduated from the same university, that's a great way to start that off. So now let's go on to the next slide and take a look at this sample email or LinkedIn message that you can send out.
1 second, we have a comment from Maria.
I was just going to say that persistence, I think, is key, especially that with COVID and everything, it's just really hard. And when you're applying, you need to remember that it's not you, it's just how the world is working. So you just have to be persistent and hang in there, basically, I guess.
100%. I think sometimes it's hard to not take some of the setbacks you face when you're looking for jobs personally, but it's important to always remember that these things are really not personally towards you. The reason why you couldn't land a job or you didn't get this position could be something totally unrelated, and they just haven't been able to see the quality of your skills at this time. Or there's so many other biases and unconscious biases that come into play in the workforce that people are unaware of. So persistence is key. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, so now let's take a look at a sample email or LinkedIn message that if you are reaching out to someone for the first time, you can definitely implement and show. So I'll just read it out. Dear whomever, I'm a second-year engineering student at X University and recently came across your profile on LinkedIn. I noticed that you also graduated from the same university I'm attending and are involved in the same X clubs, associations on campus. I'm eager to work this summer in the software engineering field and would love your insights on getting started in the industry. I know you're extremely busy, but I would be very grateful if we could please arrange a 15 to 20-minute phone call in the next couple of weeks. Please let me know what works best with your schedule, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. Kind regards. So now I want to ask you all, so what are some of the characteristics of this message that makes it a good example?
So I think it's great that they try to establish some kind of common ground between themselves and the hiring manager, whoever they're messaging. It's good to establish some kind of connection so that they'll feel much more inclined to respond to you.
For sure. That's definitely a big thing, that they would be more inclined.
It's clear and concise. So it's clearly written. It gets you to the point.
And not only that, I think something that's very key here is to understand that their scenario, because they might have very busy schedules. And I like the fact that near the end of the email it says it would be amazing if you can arrange a 15 to 20 meeting. I feel like that's really important, just because it's not really that much. It's not like 1 hour, so it's not that bad. Like, you're not taking away a lot of their time. So it's a really short meeting to get to know them and to discuss some of the key things. I feel like that's really important when you are arranging those kind of things. And I feel like because of that, when you are emailing someone, they will be most probably able to respond to you, just because it's very clear, and the fact that it's very short, and it's not taking a lot of their time.
For sure. Awesome. Okay, let's continue on. So the next thing, that once you've reached out to the employer and have established a date or time to meet, many of you are probably wondering the same thing. So what am I supposed to ask? This is a great question, and it definitely can be daunting at first if you've never had many of these coffee chats before, or you're speaking to someone who's in a position of power where they would be making a hiring decision in the future. So I'd like to pass it over to my co-hosts, and they can go over some common questions that you can ask.
How did you get started in this profession? How do most people get started?
And the second one, is definitely, well, what do you find most enjoyable about your job, and what is most challenging?
And the third one is, what essential skills, qualifications, and experiences have enabled you to be successful in your line of work? And another question would be, what do you find most enjoyable about your job? What do you find most challenging?
I feel like one of the most important questions that you must be asked is get to know their insights, and what they think about the future. And so a question that's really crucial would be, what trends do you feel like will impact the field in the next 5 years, and what is your opinion on the employment outlook for jobs in your field? So let's say you're talking to, let's say, Joe, right? And Joe talks about robotics as being the future, and so in that sense you're able to get his insight on some of the fields, and really what are the disruptors, and what job would really take over in the field. And so in that way you're able to learn from him, and what skills do you think will be most valuable in the next 5 years. And that way you get to know the person, and you're able to know more about them, as well as their insights on the future. I feel like that's really important, just because you're able to get to know them, and that's how you build, I guess, a connection with them.
Yeah, definitely. So starting out with those icebreaker questions about how they got started, and then, going in a little bit more in depth about their role, and then what they expect for the future. So definitely once you do a couple of these, you do get the hang of them, and always try to tailor your questions to the person that you're speaking to. So obviously go in with 5 to 10 questions prepared, but also be prepared to ask follow-up questions based on some of the things that they ask you, and always make sure that you are asking genuine things that they would be interested in and you also could take benefit from. So again, a coffee chat definitely has to be a mutually beneficial relationship. So thank you guys for all your input. Those were great questions. So now we'll just go forward to wrap up this section. These are some of the key takeaways of networking. So always ensure you have professional etiquette, whether you're meeting them in person or online. Having professional the way you conduct yourself online and in person is super important, because that really sets you apart from your competitors. Next is to spend majority of time on outreach. So they actually say to spend 70% of your time on outreach, and then 30% of the time on actually applying to jobs and such. So sorry, could you just go back? You went. Sorry. And then the third would be to stay connected. So always stay connected, and continuously don't forget to reach out to the connections that you made in the past. So it's not only about fostering new ones, but also staying up to date on the people that you've reached out to in the past and who are in your network. And then finally, the fourth thing to remember is to pay it forward. So For example, if you've received help from someone and then maybe 5 to 10 years later down the line, they need something from you, or you can be of a resource towards them, definitely always be willing to help and be ready to help them as too, because this is at the end of the day, it's like a cycle, right? If someone helps you, then you definitely want to give back to not only them, but other people in your circle or community as well. So that pretty much wraps up the networking section. And now we'll be moving on to the next part, how to build your resume. So now the resume is one of the key items required for getting your foot in the door. And I know it's not always the most exciting part and interesting part, but these tips that we have for you will definitely have you well on your way to building your professional resume. So before we begin, let's start with a little fun video to get started.
I would love to be part of your in-horse design team. It's just too darn to spell check.
Your team needs me. My parents think I'm spectacular.
My ability to think outside the box, create synergy amongst my team, as well as leverage my core competency has been a real game changer for me. Blah, 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 blah.
I'm an ideas guy. I don't work.
Please find my resume attached. There's nothing attached. I would have attached it, but Netflix is the thing?
Job experience, baker, Roots Bakery, December 2014 to January 2015. Paralegal, Owens & Owens LLC, March 2015 to July 2015. I get fired a lot.
Job experience, HR manager 2007 to 10, assistant to the HR director 2015 to present. And those years in between, well, just a big pool of ayahuasca vomit.
Awards and achievements. Prom queen. I peaked in high school.
Skills? Word processing. I also know how to chew my own food. References blank. Everyone hates me. You will too.
References, Teresa Brown. At the same number as mine. That's me, but in a British accent. Oh, pip pip cheerio, kibbles and bits.
Interests, member of the International Brotherhood of Magicians. Lock your office door. Not that it will help you.
Well, that was a fun introduction. So now let's continue on to some of the characteristics of professional resumes.
Before you continue, we have a comment from Miriam that it's very important to have a professional email address because your usual addresses that maybe you made in your teenage years will not get you too far in a professional interview. I think that's a very good point that she mentioned.
Definitely. Yeah. So the simplest is usually just having your first name and last name together so that your cover letter or resume goes hand in hand with your email address and it's not too difficult to find. So thank you so much for that tip. So now getting into some of the characteristics. First of all, you want to ensure that your resume is error-free, visually appealing, and has 100% accurate information. So your resume is really your chance to make a great first impression, and having the basics of formatting, punctuation, and grammar are really important and show your ability to be detail-oriented. So next would be to highlight specific actions and skills used to achieve positive, quantifiable results. So by including quantifiable actions, it shows actual evidence and the legitimacy of the actions that you took rather than just stating them. So for instance, saying something such as managed promotional committees of 12 and presented marketing plans to an audience of 40 to 60 students at weekly university club meetings open to all 2,000 community members. This really shows the breadth of what you contributed and not just simply something such as organized group meetings or team meetings. It shows the numbers, what you were able to accomplish with this, and how you were able to gain an outreach of over 2,000 community members, which is impressive. Next would be to speak the language of the writer's target industry, but make sure that it's engaging for all. So each industry, whether it's tech, business, they have specific requirements, and we encourage you to follow those rules and techniques, but also remember that it should be easy to read and understand by everyone. And then finally, to genuinely address the requirements and expectations of the employer. So when you're crafting your resume, it's really important to look at the job ad or speak to someone who's in that field or industry and see some of the key competencies or technical skills that would be required. And then also putting those through on your resume too, because a lot of the times a human is not looking at your resume and it goes through one of those systems that just automatically checks for any keywords or skills. So in that way, you do want to make sure that you are addressing the needs and tailoring the resume to the correct audience. Okay, so now we'll be getting into some of the formatting techniques. I'll just go through this pretty quickly, but making sure that your length is not more than 2 full pages. Usually for students and for youth, we do recommend 1, and then also highlighting your volunteer experiences, because before you have a lot of professional experiences, the volunteer experiences is what really sets you apart in your extracurriculars. So then making sure that you have consistent bolding and italicizing and not overusing them, as well as using an easy to read font style such as Arial, Calibri, or Times New Roman, and then being consistent with the dates. So for example, if you decided to put the month and the year, then say that, keep that consistent throughout and don't change that in your resume. So now we can go on to the next part, which is creating accomplishment statements. So the accomplishment statements are really comprised of 3 core ideas, which are the action, context, and then the results and the goal. So there's, first of all, the action, what you did. Have you led? Did you motivate? Have you contributed to something? So brainstorming a list of those actions and focusing on relevant job-related transferable skills is what's going to set you apart. So then the next thing is context. So what have you actually done in that role that you've used those skills? So for example, in the example I'll show you, conducting market gap analysis, that's the context of the actions that you performed. And then finally, the results and goals. So really taking some time to reflect on some of the achievements that you've had and seeing what have been the goals that I've accomplished throughout these experiences. What have I done to increase an organization's efficiency, for example, or reduce costs, or I have integrated this new technology. These are all results of the things that you've done. So for example, I'd like to go through this one that I've created, and it's independently conducted market gap analysis to identify new business opportunities that yielded 18 new contracts and increased sales by 20% within 12 months across the client group. So I think this model, this example really fits that model properly because it has the 3 components that I mentioned. It starts out with an action verb independently conducted, and then has all of those quantifiable things as well. So it has a time frame of 12 months, and then it's actually showing the actual context that you've done. So increasing sales by 20%. So yeah, that's definitely a good example and how you should definitely go about building those accomplishment statements in your resume.
Yeah, just to add on to that, and once again, I just really the emphasis on your the numerical information that you put is really key when you give this kind of information. Just because if you say that you won first place in a group of 10, it is not as impressive as someone who got first place in a group of 200. So I feel like adding those key numerical information really emphasizes your capabilities and skills that might help you fulfill those requirements for that particular job, and it might even separate you from the rest of the candidates who are actually applying for that job as well.
Okay, so now let's take a look at this quick video that highlights some great tips for students.
One of the biggest issues with resume tips from the internet is that most of it is subjective. What works for me might not work for you, and vice versa. So when Austin Belsack released his findings from analyzing 125,484 resumes, I got excited because data, to a large extent, takes the guesswork out of the equation. In my opinion, his findings are pure gold because it basically confirmed my suspicions that in order to write an incredible resume, there are some proven foundational principles we should follow, whether we're making a resume for our first job or improving upon a good resume we've had for years. As usual, I care about your time, so I'm going to share the 5 key learnings up front, then talk about the implications of the study, and end with practical resume writing tips you can use immediately to stand out. So let's get started. Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Jeff, and we're all about practical career interview and productivity tips. So if you're a working professional, consider subscribing for more actionable content. Full disclosure, Austin did not ask me to make this video. He doesn't even know who I am. The data geek in me just got so excited about all the numbers that I just had to share it in a video format. Without further ado, the 5 key learnings from Austin's study. Number 1, resumes with a LinkedIn profile see higher interview rates, but only 48% of resumes included a LinkedIn profile. Number 2, candidates only included 51% of important keywords and skills, heavily under-indexing on soft skills. Number 3, measurable metrics improve resume outcomes, but only 26% of resumes included 5 or more metrics. Number 4, research shows that the ideal resume length is 475 to 600 words. 77% of resumes fell outside of that range. And number 5, fluffy content takes away from a resume's value, but 51% of resumes included buzzwords, cliches, or incorrect pronouns. I'm gonna link the original article.
Awesome. So, after first watching this video, I think my first reaction to this was there's so many misconceptions and things that we don't know. So either making your resume too long or too short, or just adding some fluff and words to make it sound like you're educated or have those certain skills without actually having those quantifiable results, it won't pay off in the long run unless you can actually show them. So now I'd like to get into a bit of an activity that everyone can participate in. So please send your thoughts in the Zoom and Facebook chats. So I have 2 examples of resumes here, and I really want to know your thoughts about the format and content of the resume. So what do you guys think about this one?
The text, some part of it is colored, and also there's a photo, which in a resume there's supposed to be no photo, and it's supposed to be just plain text, and it should be just outlined professionally. This is not done professionally.
Yeah, exactly. No, there shouldn't be a photo, and then the colors as well are definitely unnecessary.
What industry is he working for, may I ask?
This was just an example. I think this was a business for a sales associate position.
Well, if it was a way more refined version and he was maybe a graphic designer trying to show off his skills, maybe it would have worked, but this just looks like 1998 Word document font exhibition.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's not professionally done at all. Any other things that maybe you could improve on?
So he doesn't use the action, context, and goal model that we talked about earlier, which would definitely help increase his chances of getting hired if he used terms like that. Use the model.
Sure. Yeah, no, all great points. Okay, let's go on to the second example, and I'd like to hear your thoughts about this one.
This one has just the name and the basic information like email and LinkedIn, and it's also done in a chronological order. So I feel like this actually gives a lot of information, and it also points out the star situation, like what we discussed, the accomplished statements. So I think that's how a resume should be.
For sure. Yeah. And especially when, they say hiring managers only spend about 6 seconds per resume. So when it's such a short period of time, you really want to have all of your contact information easily accessible at the top, and then having bolded your experience and the years that you were there, just so like they can really skim through. So I think this is a lot more easy to read in that regard. Anything else?
I agree with the format. Once again, it's just very clear and concise, easy to follow, rather than the other one. This is like all over the place. I feel like for an employer, especially, it would be hard to navigate through. And especially for this one, it's much more easier. It's like, it's like step by step. So, and it goes, it goes in a very good order as well. So it's, you can follow through exactly what, they went from this position to this position, from that position, and exactly what they learned from each one. And in that way, which is really important, especially, if you're an employee. And once again, this is really clear. And if for that limited time frame that you said, like 6 seconds, I feel like this is a really good resume for that.
For sure. Yeah, no, awesome tips. Thanks, guys. Okay, so now we'll get into the next part of our session, designing your cover letter. So the cover letter is really about telling your story and making your case for why you would be the ideal candidate. So a checklist that I just created to really making your cover letter stand out is by following these 4 tips. So start strong. Start out with an opener that really sets you apart and can't be said by anyone else, because that's the first line that the hiring manager is reading, and it's important that it's not something generic or something that's been used many times. The second point would be to tell your story. Tell a story about a job accomplishment or something that you've achieved that you think relates to the job that you're applying to. The next thing would be to provide evidence. Again, quantifying your achievements and really showing how that evidence aligns with some of the tasks that you would be performing in this new job would be a great tip. And finally, positioning yourself to their need. So understanding what the organization is looking for through speaking with people in the industry and reaching out to others. And then understanding that it really goes a long way if you're able to communicate that concisely in your cover letter. So there's 4 pieces to include. There's the opening, which obviously is the attention. It captures the attention of the reader. Then the connection, so some type of insightful link between you and the employer. And this could be anything really. If you use their products, for example, in the past, let's say you're applying to a bank job and you have been going to the bank for the past 20 years and you really appreciate how fast and accessible their customer service is, that's something. Or if you've spoken to someone at a networking session and you really connected with them, you can bring that up in the connection portion. The next part would be match. So your skills and qualifications of what you offer. So really outlining that clearly and not going on or having too much to say, obviously, in the cover letter as well, because it should just be concise and to the point. And then finally, your close would be your call to action. What are the next steps that you are hoping to take, and just thanking the employer for the time. Okay, so now let's take a look at this example of a cover letter, and I just wanted to know again, what are your opinions on this? What are some of the things that they've either done well or they could improve on?
It should be addressed properly. It just says contributors editor. It should be addressed with the email and position to the employer. So that's not done correctly in this one.
Definitely, yeah, exactly. And it doesn't have the job title or the requisition number.
And just looking at it, it's way too long. Like it's like nobody will really have time to go through so many cover letters from all different people. Maybe they have 20 seconds just to look at your resume and cover letter. So this is definitely way too long for that.
For sure. Yeah, it's definitely too wordy, too long, and it doesn't capture the reader's attention even from the beginning. So even the first sentence, for example, is very outdated and not the most ideal way to begin. So thanks. Let's go to the next example. And how is this one different? What do you guys think has been done here?
I mean, this one is much more clear, I guess. It's more organized. The other one, my eyes were, it was hurting. So I think this one's much easier to read and it's much easier to follow. It has all the relevant details. It has the first paragraph, I'm pretty sure it's the objective, right? He tells you exactly, where he's working and, how he has, done. It's like, there's an example where he uses like numerical information right off the bat. And he shows how, within those, key things I have done, this is like the main other things I have also done. And, highlighting that, like, especially when he bolded it, like, for example, the first point, it really shows like his key thing that he has done, within that job and how that might benefit the company itself. And that really creates a really good cover letter for the job you're applying for.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I completely agree. So first, he has all of his contact information right at the top, which is definitely something that should be done. And then I really like how it has that attention grabbing opening statement, as well as having all of the different bulleted points, so that instead of a long paragraph, you can just quickly see what are his key skills. And that would definitely be more appealing to a hiring manager. Awesome. Okay, so that really wraps up our cover letter portion. And now for the last section of our session, we'll be informing the youth on how to best prepare for interviews. So interviews can definitely be stressful to start out, but after practice and proper preparation, they definitely become more natural over time. And the best tip is to always be yourself and highlight your relevant skills and experiences. So let's take a look now at a video that goes into a bit more depth on how to best prepare.
Arguably the most crucial part of the job search, an interview can make or break an opportunity. So to help you really prepare, we're going to dissect and analyze an entire interview from start to finish. I'll be sprinkling in a mix of tips about body language, etiquette, and how to answer common questions. Like, when exactly does the interview start? How do you deal with nerves? And how soon can you follow up? For years, athletes have used science and data analysis to improve. Now, we are doing the same for job seekers everywhere. This is job science. Meet Anya, a recent grad majoring in business administration. She's interviewing for an entry-level project management position. Note her posture. Head up, shoulders pulled back, no slouching, and no laid backness. The interview begins the minute you walk into the building. Anya treats everyone in the office with respect while keeping eye contact. From security personnel to receptionists, anyone you run into on your way in could be asked to give feedback on you. It's normal to be nervous. When nerves kick in, the natural human response is to take short breaths and breathe faster. Stay calm by taking a deep breath before entering. Hold it, count to 3, and then slowly breathe out. Pause. First, ace those introductions. Greet everyone in a way that is authentic to you, like, hey, nice to meet you, and then say their name. That one always works. You know, you're more likely to remember their name if you say it out loud when you first meet. A lot of the time, small talk comes up before any questions. It's good to have a few current events or topics in mind. You can't possibly predict what they're gonna ask, but you can practice answering the common ones, like, why do you wanna work here? What makes you unique? Let's see what our interviewer asks.
So I want to hear more. Tell me a little about your experience and what you'd bring to this role.
Pause. When this is asked, they're looking to learn what makes you stand out. Be honest with your answers. That means having to pause and think for a second. That is all right. Think about your past experiences and how the role lines up with your future goals. It never hurts to be honest.
Great question. Ever since I was young, I've always been the organized one in my family. Whether it was helping my parents schedule vacations or color coordinating my closet. Naturally, that lifestyle got me here, project management. I've been a people person for as long as I can remember. Plain and simple, I love team building and making sure everyone has a part. Just the other month.
Ooh, just really quick, don't speak negatively about previous places you've worked. Instead, talk about what you've learned.
I helped lead a team of 5 to deliver a 3-week sales project a few days ahead of schedule. I'd love to bring these things here.
Perfect. A response like this not only answers the question, but also shows off her personality. But remember, there's no one right way to interview and answer questions. Be yourself and let your personality shine. Be aware of your movements. Practice polite, confident body language. Subtly miming your interviewer's posture can actually create a sense of connection. Of all places, unnecessary movements are hard to ignore in an interview. Whether it's tapping your fingers or bouncing your leg, be aware and stay present.
Hey, it's been great chatting so far. I guess my last question is, do you have any questions for me?
Ooh, this is a hot one. Make sure to have a short list of questions for your employer in your back pocket. Ask the questions you would if you got the job. If tomorrow was your first day, what would you want to know from the manager? Even if you don't have any burning questions, asking a few shows that you did your homework and that you really care. Some include, what do you like best about working here? What are some mistakes people have made in this position? What is a goal you're currently working toward? How will my performance be evaluated?
Well, I did read that you're expanding your software team next quarter. I'm curious how you plan to carry that out.
The interview isn't actually over. Always follow up within 24 hours with a thank you email to the hiring manager. This can be a quick note simply thanking them for their time, or a longer one that elaborates on some of the things you talked about. It's key to leaving a lasting impression. This was the breakdown of an interview. Till next time.
Okay, awesome. So I think he definitely highlighted a lot of interview tips that sometimes people don't think about as much. For example, a lot of the times people spend a long time practicing questions and behavioral techniques and all of those things. And while they're extremely important, your body language says a lot too, and the way you conduct yourself and your confidence. So I think that's something that I definitely took away from this video, but I'd like to hear from all of you now. So what are your best tips for interview prep, and things that have worked in the past maybe, or things that haven't worked as much?
I would say always prepare for the common questions, because you never know when the employer is going to ask you that question and anytime during the interview. Also, make sure you know what you're saying, because the employer is going to check your LinkedIn, and then the employer is going to check your resume. So it has to be you. So make sure it's accurate and you know what you're saying in there.
For sure. So I think something that's really important is not only knowing the skills and qualifications of the job and things that, you know, you need to present yourself, for example, the questions, but also knowing your past experiences inside and out and really being able to speak to them in a professional way, and knowing, having like a 60 to 90-second pitch for each of your experiences and really highlighting the main things that you've taken out of them. So thank you,
Yeah, I mean,
Hunyah.
like I even agree with Hunyah, right? I think the two key things that I find like really important, like based on my experiences, to be really confident in what you're, saying. So I feel like that leaves a really good impression on your employer, especially like when they're interviewing you, because it shows that you're really confident and you exactly know what's going on, and you're really confident the answers you're giving. And not only that, is the next tip would be to study the company well, know exactly what the company is all about. There's might be things that you might know about the company that might be really interesting to you, and it really shows that you have a really really deep interest for that one company. Like for example, if let's say if it was a software company, or what do you like about that company? Do you like their team? Do you like their equipment? And I feel like giving that interest and studying their company well and including that in your answers is really key in showing your your I guess your passion and interest towards that job, which once again is really good, especially when you're going for an interview.
Definitely, Rijin. Yeah, and I think Anu also in the comment really echoed that, saying read about the organization. So don't only read about what they do on a day-to-day basis, but also getting to know about their culture. What are the types of people that they look for? Are they really, concerned about social impact or environmental impact? And those are all important things that through my experiences, I've brought up in interviews, for example, and they really appreciated that I've gone that extra mile and learned about them. So yeah, no, awesome. Thank you all. Thank you all for your discussion points.
Yeah, true. We have to research the company, and you have to also be updated with who is actually at which position in the company too. That could also come up in an interview anytime, that okay, who is the manager, let's say for they could say who is the outreach coordinator for the position right now as of this date, as according to their previous managers that they had in the same position. So it's always good to know that who's currently where and how much you know about the organization.
Yeah, it's also important to know about who your interviewer is, that if a lot of the times they give you the names of who's interviewing you. So doing a little bit of background research and knowing about, what are some of the places that they've worked in the past, what's their main role, and then really asking those role specific questions so they see that you've put in that time to do research on themselves and the company. So definitely, Hunyah, I totally agree.
And once again, just to add on to that, I feel like the questions are really also important. So once the interview is over, once again, like the video, it highlights that the interview is not over when you think it is over. It's like there's always a second step. And I feel like the questions is really important because once again, it further emphasizes your interest towards the company and why you want to do in the first place. Like once again, that YouTube video shows how the candidate, she wanted to know more about the company, right? She wanted to know about the schedule, she wanted to know about anything. So it really shows how once again you're really interested in the company and what exactly they're aiming for, and you really you would be the successful candidate for them just because you have that deep interest for their company.
Definitely.
So we have another comment from Facebook Live from Samia, that a lot of job boards are asking the candidates to complete pre-interview assessments and practicum. So make sure you do them well and stand out in the hiring process.
Yeah, definitely. These days, interviews are not only, one round and then you get the job. A lot of times there are 2 or 3 rounds that you have to go through. There's a screening, and then this happens all after they've screened your resume. So standing out on all of those things is, kind of what we've talked about throughout, being professional and really staying up to date on trends in the industry and being knowledgeable about yourself and the organization. So definitely. Okay, so I think thank you everyone for those great tips. Now we'd like to wrap up the session and leave some time for any questions. So if you have any questions or comments about our session, feel free to add it into the chat. We really appreciate all your feedback and the time that you've taken out to come and join us this evening as always. And we really hope that this session was informative to all. So please stay connected to Youth for Change using our social media, like and subscribe. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as well as our YouTube channel where we will be posting this recorded session tomorrow. So we would love your feedback on this session and any ideas for future Youth for Change sessions in the coming weeks. And now I'd like to pass it over to Cynthia, and she'll be introducing our next week's session.
So for next Wednesday at 7 p.m., we will be talking about digital design and how that ties in with marketing. This will be a great session for those who are interested in design and or would like to create promotional designs for your own business. If you'd like to be a part of the Youth Empowerment Series and come on the show with us, then make sure you fill out the event registration form on youthforchange.ca/get-involved. We want to thank you for joining us, and we'd love to see you again next week. Have a great rest of your evening, and we'll respond to any questions or thoughts that you have.
Thank you so much, everyone, for engaging with us throughout the session. We really appreciate it.